The sad reality is that the situation in Northern Ireland is now extremely serious. The slow but steady progress of previous years has been replaced by a growing sense of alienation and crisis. The many economic and social opportunities opened up by peace and agreed institutions are being lost. And with this, the core challenge of reconciliation is sidelined. The disengagement of our government and the Cameron government is something I've been challenging for years. I take no satisfaction that the crises that I predicted would follow this policy have all happened. However, there is no question that the root cause of the current problems has been the approach of the DUP Sinn Fein tandem. They have sought to maximise party advantage in government rather than work in a consensual way. Cases of sectarian funding, the abuse of expenses and the marginalisation of day-to-day issues continue to mount. No one can now question the impact that the DUP Sinn Fein administration, which has systematically excluded other parties from playing a meaningful role, has had on the public. Last month, the latest Northern Ireland Life and Times survey report was published. This has tracked political and social attitudes since 1998 and is the most detailed work of its type carried out anywhere in Europe. The latest survey shows a major deterioration of public faith in institutions and the belief that the Assembly and Executive are more detached than ever. By a measure of 66% of people are dissatisfied with the work of MLAs. This is similar across age, social class and national identity. 76% of people say that the Assembly has made no difference or given people less of a say in northern issues. 84% say the Assembly has achieved only a little or nothing at all. And when asked what the Assembly and Executive should be focused on, people didn't choose political issues, but said the economy and the health service. Their overall demand was for parties to make, quote, devolution work in a way which is fair to all, unquote. In most areas, there has been an undeniable disimprovement in attitudes towards politics, which traces directly to the manner in which the Assembly and Executive have operated under DUP and Sinn Féin control. And a very good illustration of the impact of this was seen in the recent United Kingdom general election, where over 40% of people did not vote. Northern Ireland has gone from having one of the highest turnouts in these elections to having one of the lowest. Much of this reduced turnout is concentrated in marginal communities and amongst the supporters of other parties who see themselves excluded from all policy discussions and are drifting away from political engagement. The long-term damage this could cause in Northern Ireland is profound. It's not just a political attitude that you can see a deteriorating situation. While the two parties have worked hard to divide the spoils of power between themselves, they have presided over a marked deterioration of the economic and social situation of Northern Ireland. Last year, Deputy First Minister McGuinness attacked me on this matter and claimed to have delivered economically for Northern Ireland. At the recent Ardèche of his party, he said it again and added the patently false claim that, quote, Sinn Féin doesn't do austerity, unquote. Rates of poverty, and child poverty in particular, in Northern Ireland have continued to worsen, with the gap with the United Kingdom expanding. Over 46% of children in West Belfast are living in poverty. Not just at risk of poverty, but actually in poverty. Pensioner poverty in Northern Ireland is 1/3 higher than in the United Kingdom. Tackling this through an ambitious development plan should be the issue dominating Northern discussions, but it is at most marginal. The current development plan is limited and more about appearing to do something rather than actually doing it. Agreed by the DUP and Sinn Féin with London, without even the courtesy of mentioning it to the Dublin government beforehand, there is no proposal to unleash the huge potential of cross-border economic development, and there is no economic vision for Northern Ireland. Providing a blueprint for economic opportunity and tackling poverty is what is desperately needed in the north. Yet the largest parties are focused on everything but this. It is striking that Sinn Féin has, during the last 17 years, chosen never to nominate a person to hold one of the principal economic ministries. The current political impasse is the logical outcome of an approach which is focused on maximising political positioning rather than operating in the spirit of cooperation which the Irish people voted for. It is not just about the UK government's welfare policies. When Sinn Féin signed up to the Stormont House Agreement, it signed up to implement these policies with some minor changes. What we are seeing at the moment is a desperate attempt by Sinn Féin to find a way of allowing these cuts through, but still claiming to be against them. This is the party which is savagely cutting back on school staffing and threatening 50 schools, but still delivering speeches claiming Sinn Féin doesn't do austerity. This is the same party which claims in the South it will abolish property tax and is voting to increase it in Northern Ireland. Let no one be in any doubt. The welfare cuts are wrong and will cause serious damage in Northern Ireland, just as the other cuts which Sinn Féin and the DUP are enforcing without complaint are causing serious damage already. As Fianna Fáil said to the British Government when in office, and as we have said since, London has to understand that you must invest in overcoming entrenched division and conflict. Northern Ireland is a special case and deserves extra leeway. This should be our government's position, but unfortunately it is not. However, the crisis goes well beyond the welfare issues. In fact, the implementation of nearly all of the important issues addressed in the Stormont House Agreement is delayed. Arrangements to allow the effective review of policies by parties other than the DUP and Sinn Féin were supposed to be in place in March. This has not happened. The Commission on Flags, Identity, Culture and Tradition was supposed to be established last month, and legislation on parades was due to be proposed. This has not happened, and another contentious marching season is underway. A civic advisory panel was supposed to be established last month. Again, this has not happened. The Budget Act is not required for any of these measures, but they remain frozen. Northern Ireland desperately needs a new impetus for progress. Stagnation and drift is deeply dangerous. It breeds alienation and threatens a return to cycles of sectarian violence which at times seem very close. There are a range of concrete steps which can and should urgently be taken. The governments can, if they have the will, take the initiative on these and break the deadening grip of the largest parties on the entire process. First of all, a new economic and social development plan is urgently required. Entrenched poverty and unemployment have to be tackled. Independent of the funding issue, what is required is at very least a sense of direction and a demonstration of ambition. We need a new energy behind the North-South dimension of the agreement. The disinterest of the British government, the party politics of the DUP and Sinn Féin, and the lack of urgency from our government has reduced the North-South dimension to a series of meetings and photo opportunities. All parts of this island are suffering because of the failure to unleash the full potential for cooperation on economic and service development. There are individual examples of progress, but they represent only a fraction of the true potential. For 4 years, we've been hearing about discussions. It's time for action, setting out specific plans for the development of North-South initiatives, both formal bodies and other initiatives. There's an overpowering case for seeking a joint border area economic and social services development plan. A lengthy history of sectarianism and 30 years of an illegitimate campaign of violence have caused damage which cannot just be wished away, and an ambitious border regional plan is badly required. We also need a new urgency around challenging sectarianism. While the majority of people are showing a new commitment to cross-community understanding, there is a substantial minority wedded to a deeply sectarian approach. A renewed anti-sectarian initiative is needed, and a start should be made by calling out politicians who use sectarianism to further their own agendas. Gregory Campbell's childish mockery of the Irish language was not harmless, and the fact that he faced no consequences reflects badly on his party. So too does the blatantly sectarian campaign of Sinn Féin in North Belfast in the recent election. Calling on people to vote by religion and get one over on the other side is sectarianism pure and simple, and Sinn Féin should stop trying to find excuses for it. The failure of political leadership to properly assist the fight against sectarianism and to promote a genuine spirit of equality was demonstrated by Deputy Adams' disgraceful comments last year when he said, and when he talked about, quote, breaking the bastards, and said that equality is, quote, the Trojan horse of the entire Republican strategy, unquote. He can do his usual twisting and turning, claiming that black is white and vice versa, but his words are on the record. Equality is not a strategy. It's not something to be exploited. It's the fundamental and core foundation of the entire strategy of the people of Ireland. When a party of government in Northern Ireland speaks so cynically about equality, it's inevitable that the others will continue to resist it. The equality agenda remains essential and needs the governments to insist on the implementation of past agreements. Addressing issues of the past should not be an option, it is essential. So far, the Irish Government, due to initiatives taken by past governments, is the only party to the process which has been willing to be fully open and honest about its failings. Everyone else has been taking the position of demanding openness from others while protecting their own. The evidence of state collusion with loyalists in grotesque sectarian crimes is overwhelming. It must be investigated independently, and the families of victims given the right to know what happened and who was responsible. So too, the collusion with elements of the Provisional IRA must be investigated. Significant collusion between state security forces and elements within the Provisional IRA did happen, and many people were murdered as a result of that, wrongly murdered as a result of that, and there are still cases being addressed in relation to that, or people pursuing cases in relation to that to the present day. The Dail has called for a full investigation of the revelations of the ongoing protection by the Provisional IRA of their own members when accused of child abuse. This is a problem which Deputy Adams has admitted was known about. While Sinn Féin did their usual trick of calling for cooperation with the justice system, yet again no one has come forward. Sinn Féin has been able to expel people for wanting to deselect a TD, but cannot find anyone to take action against in relation to the systematic covering up of child abuse within the provisional movement. Of course, there are limits to what can be done, but our government has a duty to demand a proper independent inquiry so that victims north and south can come forward and begin a process of healing which must start with accountability for those who abuse them and those who work to prevent justice being done. The Parliament promised Michea Cahill and Paddy McGahan and other brave victims that we could not rest until their abusers were held to account, and we must honour this promise. The increasingly dysfunctional political situation in Stormont needs to be tackled. Growing detachment and disengagement from politics is the direct and inevitable outcome of how the DUP and Sinn Féin are controlling the Assembly and the Executive. They are focused on obtaining as much party political advantage as possible. Other parties are routinely excluded from discussions, and the system is milked for party advantage. Northern Ireland has half the population of Wales, but its leaders have twice the number of publicly funded political advisers. Ministers of both parties have been found to favour their own indecisions, with a Sinn Féin minister, Conor Murphy, found by a court to have made a major appointment on a sectarian basis. Through the tenacity of journalists, a large-scale abuse of political funding has been revealed, none of which would be possible under the legislation in operation here for nearly 2 decades. Deputy Adams never sat a day in Westminster, but took over €1 million in expenses during the last decade. BBC Spotlight found that over €1 million has been funnelled by Sinn Féin MLAs to Research Services Ireland Limited, but was unable to find details of any research work carried out by the company. And this is on top of the money funnelled by Sinn Féin to fictitious cultural organisations. There is an urgent need for the governments to demand a tightening up of the controls on public funding of politics and for the establishment of controls along the lines of those operated here, which would make such abuses illegal.
Thank you, Deputy.
The revelations in relation to Service and Official Gas and the NAMA portfolio have rightly led to concerns about political involvement. The memo of understanding between Northern Ireland Executive and PIMCO illustrates an incredible degree of political engagement and official involvement in the sale of the Northern Ireland loan book of NAMAs. And it's incredible that Sinn Féin would not have understood or been fully aware of what was going on throughout that entire saga. In the referendums of 1998, the people of this island choose to support a new way forward. They acknowledged our shared future and set all parties the challenge of working together for the common good. And too often, they have failed. Unless we see new energy and commitment, we will continue with the cycle of ongoing crises, and profound problems will be left to fester. We need a renewed engagement by the governments. We need a new vision for the economic and social development of the North and the border region in general. We need a concerted effort to challenge sectarianism, starting with the casual sectarianism of political parties. We need a determined effort to sort out a dysfunctional and deeply cynical approach by the dominant parties. The peace process was and remains a great victory for constitutional Republicans on this island, who did everything possible and many things thought impossible to get the paramilitaries to put down their guns and end their illegitimate campaign. But the work isn't over. Much more is required, and unless we are willing to commit to this effort, we could make an error of genuinely historic proportions.